So, what happens when the search for justice actually threatens to break the very system that's supposed to deliver it? It's a tough question, and it's right at the heart of the tragic Karur crowd crush and the really controversial Supreme Court decision that came after. So, are we looking at real justice here? Or is this a case of dangerous judicial overreach? Let's dive in and unpack it.
We've all heard that saying, justice delayed is tragic. And it is. But this quote, it makes you think about something maybe even scarier. What happens if the rush for justice actually ends up twisting it all out of shape? I mean, after a horrible tragedy, of course people want answers, and they want them now. But what if all that pressure pushes our highest court to, well, bend the very rules that are supposed to guarantee fairness? That's exactly the tightrope we're walking with the Karur case.
So, this is the big question we really have to wrestle with. Was the Supreme Court's intervention a totally necessary step to make sure the investigation was impartial, free from any political meddling? Or did they cross a really dangerous line, maybe even weakening the very institutions they're supposed to protect? To get to the bottom of that, we've got to look at what actually happened.
Okay, so to really get why this is so controversial, we have to go back to that tragic day. Let's walk through exactly what happened. So, it all kicked off on September 30th, 2025. There was a political rally for the Tamilaga Vettri Kazhagam, the TVK, and a horrific crowd crush led to a devastating loss of life. Right away, things got messy. There was all this procedural confusion at the Madras High Court about the investigation. And then, bam, just 2 weeks later, on October 13th, the Supreme Court does something huge. They step in and transfer the entire case from the state police to the CBI, India's top federal agency. Let's just let that number sink in for a moment. 41. That isn't just a statistic. That's 41 families completely torn apart. 41 people who went out for the day to a rally and just never made it back. And it's that immense human tragedy, that incredible loss, that makes the public demand for justice so loud. So, why would the Supreme Court take such a huge step, pulling an investigation away from the state police? Well, their official reasoning really came down to one thing: impartiality. The court was worried that the state police just couldn't be neutral, especially after some officials had already come out publicly defending their actions. So the thinking was, to restore public faith, you had to bring in an outside agency. But here's the thing. Was this the right move? Or was it, as a lot of people are now arguing, a classic case of the cure being worse than the disease? This is exactly where the decision blows up into a major controversy, and it starts to raise some really tough questions about our entire legal system. And this is where we run into a huge legal paradox. On one hand, the court's stated goal was impartiality, right? But to get there, it seems like they had to break their own rules. See, there's a major judgment from 2010 that specifically says you shouldn't just hand cases over to the CBI based on allegations or public outcry alone. But by doing just that, the court kind of tied itself in a legal knot.
Okay, so the criticism of this decision really breaks down into three big problem areas. First, you've got the legal paradox we just talked about. The court went against its own precedent, and critics say the evidence of bias was pretty weak. Second, there's the institutional fallout. This kind of move can really undermine the confidence of the state police, and crucially, it kind of shifts the focus away from the accountability of the rally organizers, the TVK. And third, you have the federalism issue. It really blurs the lines between what the judiciary should be doing and what the state government's job is.
And, here's the real kicker. The CBI, the very agency that's supposed to be the symbol of impartiality here, was once described by the Supreme Court itself as a caged parrot. What they meant was that it sometimes just echoes what the central government wants. So that leaves us with a massive question. Did the court actually get rid of bias, or did they just swap one potential bias for another?
So what are the ripple effects here? What's the potential long-term damage? Well, for one, it sets a tricky precedent, right? You could see more cases getting transferred just because there's a lot of public noise, not because of hard evidence. It also lets the rally organizers kind of fade into the background when their role needs to be examined. Plus, it weakens the federal structure by undermining state police, and it really muddies the waters between the judiciary and the executive branch. All right, so if the decision has all these problems, what's the alternative? I mean, how do we get justice for the victims of this tragedy without damaging the very system that's supposed to provide it? Let's talk about a possible path forward. This whole thing is much bigger than just the Karur case. It taps into a huge ongoing national debate in India. It's the classic tug of war between judicial activism, where courts step in to protect citizens, and judicial overreach, where they might be going too far, stepping into the government's territory.
And right now, the Karur case has become a real flashpoint in that argument.
So, how do we move forward from here? Well, many experts are pointing to a three-step approach. First, we need to define some really clear, consistent standards for when you can transfer a case to a central agency. That way, it's not an arbitrary decision. Second, the scrutiny has to be applied equally to everyone involved, not just the administrative failures, but the political organizers as well. And third, and this is the really tricky part, we have to find that balance between restoring public faith in justice and respecting the independence of our institutions.
Ultimately, it all boils down to this fundamental question. The 41 people who lost their lives in Karur, they absolutely deserve justice. There is no question about that. But this case forces all of us to stop and think about what justice really means. Is it a fast, headline-driven intervention that gives the appearance of action, or is it something deeper, a careful, fair, and thorough process that follows the rules of due process, even when it's slow and frustrating? That's the heavy question that the Karur tragedy leaves us with.